Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to the second episode of When the Heart Leads. This is the second episode of the second season, and we are going to explore the second principle of joy today. So, lots of coming together here, and today is a really special day for a couple of reasons. I'm recording and releasing this on August 1st, which is the Lammas celebration. So, in the Celtic, the wheel of the year, Lammas falls in between the summer solstice and the autumn equinox. It's the center point between them, if you're in the northern hemisphere, of course. And so it's a really special day. It's known as the day of the first harvest. So there's a lot of joy, a lot of bounty, a lot of abundance, feelings of abundance this day. And of course, it's a week before the Lionsgate 8/8 portal day. So it's a big day for energies, for openings, for receiving. So wherever you are, I just really invite you to open to that. And it's also a really special day for Books of Eden Publishing. So if you followed my work, you'll know that I'm the founder and creative director of Books of Eden Publishing. And we are releasing today a really special book called Impermanence by Cody Wiggs. And there's a little story behind this book. I've been working with Cody's family to release this book because he passed a few years ago and left behind this immense treasure trove of writings. And so I will have a link to that if you're interested. I'll have a link to that underneath this post, and I will also be sending out more information on that. There's a press release going out today. So if you are on the Books of Eden email list, you'll receive that. If you are not, I recommend you get on it. I really only use it for new releases and big announcements. So you know that whatever you receive is something important, at least important for Books of Eden. So yeah, so that's a big announcement. Again, Dr. Catherine Hall, I'm also published under Dr. Catherine Hall Newberg. So if you are receiving this, I have my major social media outlet is Substack, and I release a weekly passage called Aniata Speaks. As well, I'm releasing the audiobook of my most recent book, Aniata Speaks, A Tale of Creation as Told by the Fae. That's being released as a serial to subscribers. So if you're interested, I also have a link under there. But all right, that is the announcements for today. It's a big day. It's a special day. And it's also a day where we are going to explore the second principle of joy. So are you ready? I am ready. Let's jump in. All right. So as just a quick recap, the first principle of joy, if you hadn't watched the first episode, right, it's your joy, my joy, our joy is essential, right? And so the idea of that principle is that you place your joy into a place of emphasis in your life that's as important as love, as important as your basic needs, food, water. Joy is placed in that category. And what shifts in your life when you begin to perceive of your joy in that way, right? And we've talked about how it's enlivening to the spirit, how it's the nectar of your soul, the nectar of your spirit. And then we talked practically about some ways to begin to explore things that bring you joy. And so that leads us right into the second principle of joy, which I described as so awaken. I called it the awakened principle 2. Joy is present now, regardless of circumstance. So I'll say that again. Joy is present now, regardless of circumstances. And the misconception that this principle addresses is joy arrives when everything else is solved. Right. So I'll read that misconception one more time. Joy arrives. This is the misconception. Joy arrives when everything else is solved. And maybe you can feel that, oh, I'll be able to feel more joy when I'm out of debt, or when or once the kids are in college, I'll have more time to focus on joy, or once this has happened, right? So there's something about this misconception that places conditions on your joy, that something has to happen first in order for you to begin to receive joy, right? And this is a deep level of mastery that I'm referring to here, because there is, I'm sure if you're listening to this, you've heard of things called spiritual bypassing, right? Where we try to ignore the hardships of life, or we try to ignore the reality of our circumstances, like the aspect of our reality that is really difficult, or that's potentially placing us through like a challenging initiation, right? And this principle is not about ignoring that. This principle is not about denying that. This principle is a real declaration, a real expression of mastery, where you begin to find and amplify opportunities for joy within your life, no matter what is going on. And there's a few points I have on this, but one thing that this is not supposed to do is confer pressure or blame or judgment, right? Often, I think we talked about in the first episode, we mentioned like, don't let these things become just one more thing on your to-do list, right? Let them be something that your spirit rises to meet, something that you look forward to, something that captures you, arrests you, allow yourself to be in that moment. And so if, say, you're having a hard time right now, right? Or there's aspects of your life that are really difficult, that are deeply initiating you, that don't seem to have, there doesn't seem to be a light at the end of a tunnel, right? This isn't about ignoring that. And it's not about blaming yourself for not being able to feel joy at all times, right? Part of what this principle brings up is that commitment to joy is a practice. And it can start really small. So it could be as simple as letting yourself. I know that recently I visited. I wasn't planning to talk about this, but I think it's really illustrative. I visited someone who has hummingbird feeders everywhere. And it was the most wondrous thing, because these hummingbirds, at one point there were 50, 60 hummingbirds around the feeders. They were everywhere, and they let us get really, really close. Like I was close enough to see their tiny little tongues, right? And there's this moment of absolute transcendent awe and joy in that, in being able to witness that. And it can be, honestly, that was so magical that I can't imagine that, wherever my thoughts were, they wouldn't have come back. But I think that oftentimes as we're walking around preoccupied, we overlook these treasures of joy that are all strewn all around us. And I feel sometimes like all of us have connections to those higher angels, those higher powers, and they want us to experience joy. They want to amplify joy, and they'll offer these moments throughout the day. And so part of this principle is, no matter what's going on in your life, letting a part of you attune to these moments, open to these moments, allow these moments in. And it could be really fleeting. It could be 10 seconds of smelling a flower, beholding a rose, looking at some art, and then going right back in to whatever is preoccupying you, right? That's fine. This can be a practice of, and like I said, it's a real level of mastery to begin to commit to joy, even when the circumstances of your life aren't perfect. Because what I have learned the hard way, I will say, is that I kept putting things off until my life was until I thought a moment in my life would be perfect for doing something, whatever that was, right? And of course, it's not always the right timing for all things, right? But in opening to possibilities within your present circumstances, it's pretty miraculous sometimes how all of the universe begins to conspire in your favor around that to amplify it. So one day you might have 10 seconds of joy, and then that sustains you in a way, and then you're tuned to it. And the next day you might have a few moments of joy throughout the day, and then these can begin to amplify. I think of it sometimes like drops in a pool of water, and there's this drop and then the circle, the concentric circles spread outwards, and it can spread slowly, and it might not spread very far sometimes, but there is this ability to begin creating these sanctuaries within your day. And when a practice of joy, a ritual of joy, when you know that there's some sort of practice or ritual of joy that is essential to you, this is an invitation to begin inquiring about how that can be more present in your life. So so here's an example. I have a meditation practice. I've had a meditation practice for 7 or 8 years now, and it wasn't easy to start with because I was, dealing with all the dreck, and it dredged up all the things in my subconscious and my brain, and so it was a practice I committed to. But now, I can't imagine a day without it. And it's created these opportunities for stillness within me, for me to really feel into that, what feels oftentimes like a lake of stillness within me. And the more I practice it, the more I can access that, even when circumstances feel extreme. And I'm not always a pro at this, right? I definitely get triggered. I can definitely move away from that stillness, but I've created this, it's like a pathway, right? I think it's a neural pathway. I think they've definitely done studies that meditation for me specifically, sorry, meditation in general, but because this is a joy practice for me specifically, it's like, this is something I've seen, is that this practice has created pathways to that stillness that are easier and easier to access. So I think about, like, if you have a pathway to a lake, the first time you walk it, you might bend some grasses, but if you walk this path over and over and over again, then eventually it's going to be a very distinct path, and it's going to lead you to that place of stillness. And so it's a practice, it's a commitment. So maybe there is a ritual of joy for you, and maybe as I'm speaking, it's coming to mind, right? You can commit to that ritual, whatever it is, and however it wants to flow. And you can begin to consciously, intentionally create these pathways to stillness, these pathways to joy in your life, to make it easier to access it, even in times when things feel really hard. And there's this, it can be a heavy lift sometimes when everything feels hard, right? But remember, your joy is essential. And so committing to these practices, these rituals of joy, whatever they are for you, is going to open and amplify pathways for joy, and new pathways for joy, and new opportunities for joy to come in. So another thing I want to mention is that sometimes when you commit to these things, it can create conflict or backlash. And I've noticed that as well with my meditation practice. I've had to sometimes be very stubborn about it in my life. There have been times when I wake up at 4:30 in the morning, if I, to do it before work, or to do it before I wrote and then went into work, right? Because writing is another practice for me. So it hasn't always been easy to commit to, but there's something about it that felt essential, that gave me access to this inner joy, this inner stillness that this ritual specifically for me really allows for. And so that could be any ritual for you. I know I have a few. I love having cacao ceremonies, and there's just something about that, the texture, the taste, the richness, the stillness that I allow myself in that. For you, it might be a cup of coffee in the morning, and that's your peace ritual, right? And that is a sacrosanct time that nobody intrudes on. You don't talk, you don't look at your phone, whatever it is, or I had a friend who every morning she would light incense and just be in the multi-sensory experience of it. And that was her ritual every morning. And it was really peaceful. And so something else I want to mention is that, so just to tie a bow on that, you don't need to wait for everything to be perfect to start committing to joy. When you turn towards it, even in small ways in your life, it opens opportunities for it to be amplified and amplified. And sometimes it does require like a deep commitment, and it requires a lot of self-compassion. and a lot of self-forgiveness, and sometimes a lot of stubbornness to do it, right? But remember, it's essential. It all comes back to that first principle that your joy is essential. So, and then something else I want to mention, and I hope I'm not previewing another principle, but this feels important right now to mention, that I feel joy exists on the same frequencies as gratitude, peace. Um, those sometimes I can't go straight to accessing joy, but I can go to accessing compassion, right? And then compassion can be a pathway into joy, right? Because I often think joy can be an almost feels like an active state in some ways, like it's a vibrant state. And sometimes I can't access it, but I can turn to self-compassion. And then that creates the opening for something like joy or peace to come in. So I want to mention that they're all in the same frequencies. And again, just like gratitude, I think I wrote in my first book, we can have wounding around this, right? We can have wounding around something like gratitude, because if you've ever not finished your dinner and someone said to you, like, you should be grateful for that, because other people don't have it, gratitude, things like gratitude, joy, peace, stillness, compassion, they can't be things that are forced, and they can't be something that you're shamed into, right? They're natural arising when you open the space for it and you allow it and you allow yourself to receive it. So the practice for this week, the practical for this week, right, in the second principle of joy is remember that it's available to you. You don't have to wait till things are perfect in your life for it to come in. It can come in, start coming in right now, in small ways, in big ways, right? And I think I had a funny practice, which even is, it's one for me, right? Because I'll forget. But try going a day or an hour, right, without fixing anything. Now, this is something for me that I'm really working on, right? Because I can look at things as, oh, this needs to be solved, this needs to be fixed, this needs to be done, this is broken, I need to fix it, right? And see what kinds of actions arise, see what kinds of opportunities arise when you don't view your life or your circumstances as something to be fixed, right? So that mindset can come from, oh, once things are fixed, done, perfect, I can start feeling joy, right? But along with the practice of opening to those moments of joy, there can be this like mindset shift of, what if I, just for an hour, just for a morning, I turn off that mindset of things needing to be fixed, and I see what arises from there. It's an inquiry, right? I'm a researcher as well, so I have these like questions of inquiry that I'm curious about. What happens to my body? What happens to my nervous system? What happens in my life? Like, does something irreconcilable happen? If I let my guard down for a minute and just stop seeing things as situations to be fixed, right? And that might take all sorts of different forms for you, but it's a perspective shift that can also create these openings for things like joy, peace, compassion, stillness, self-love, all of that. So yeah, so I believe that was everything I wanted to go over today. Yeah, I said chaos, crisis, dull, depression. If you can find one spark of joy, it will lead you out of the cave and into expansive possibility. And this isn't to deny that things are hard and can be really hard, right? But this is permission and opening a place of gentle inquiry for you to open to the idea, the truth that joy is available to you, and to allow it to show you how it wants to come in. And I think it might surprise you how that happens, how that can happen, and what are some of the things, the rituals that you begin to find joy in, and they'll lead you to those rituals to commit to. So, all right. So I want to wish everyone just the most joyous Lammas day of the harvest. What is the yield from all of your beautiful labor? What can you relax into? What can you receive today? that is just waiting to flood into you, that's just waiting to come to you. So I'll leave you with that. Wonderful to connect. And I will be back with the third principle of joy very soon. So sending lots of love until then.